the outcome more than one or only one. Now, feedback network. So this is here the this network represents the feedback network. Here you can see feedback, and this is very simple to understand. Then when outputs are directed back, so that means you are taking back as inputs to the same or preceding layers nodes, it results in the formation of feedback networks. But when it will be reverse, then it will be feed forward network. Now, the simplified form of this feedback network could be seen like this. Now, lateral feedback. If the feedback of the output of processing elements is directed back as input to the processing elements in the same layer, then it is called lateral feedback. Now, recurrent. So, feedback networks with closed loops are called recurrent. And this is clear from the name also. The response at the k plus 1 instant depends on the entire history of the network starting from 0. So, automation or recursion, something. This is or iteration, a system with discrete time inputs and discrete data representation is called an automation. Single node with own feedback, competitive network, single layer recurrent network, multi-layer recurrent networks. Now we will be going for learning rules. What are the learning rules? It is a process by which neural network adapts itself to a stimulus by making proper parameter adjustment, resulting in the production of desired response. There are two kinds of learning: parameter learning, structure learning. Connection weights are updated from time to time. The change in network structure, that is structure learning. Then training, which is the next part here in training. So the process of modifying the weights in the connections between network layers with the objective of achieving the expected output is called training in network. This is achieved through supervised learning, unsupervised learning. That means with the presence of a teacher, you want to learn something. Unsupervised, no supervisor, no teacher is present. Then reinforcement learning. And now it comes, you can also say these things as classification of learning. So what is supervised learning? Child learns from a teacher. Each input vector requires a corresponding target vector. So training pair will be equal to input vector and target vector. Now, unsupervised learning, how a fish or tadpole learns. All similar input patterns are grouped together as clusters. So here you learn something because you need to know, irrespective who is teaching or who is not teaching you. So you just learn on your own because this is your need. Now, if matching input pattern is not found, a new cluster is formed, as you can see here. So these are the differences between supervised and unsupervised learning. So here next, you can see self-organizing. In unsupervised learning, there is no feedback. Network must discover patterns, regularities, features for the input data over the output data. While doing so, the network might change the parameter. This process is called self-organizing. Now, what is reinforcement learning and when it is used? If less information is available about the target output values, then learning based on this critic information is called reinforcement learning, and the feedback sent is called reinforcement signal. Feedback in this case is only evaluative and not instructive. And this reinforcement learning in terms of network structure could look like this. Now, how the activation function could look like. This is the third part here. So, which is the among the basics, three basics: interconnections, learning rules. Now, these two things we have learned, then activation function. So, activation function could be sigmoidal or something discrete from 0 to 1 or -1 to +1 or +1 to -1. So, identify the function, how you are going to write the identity function, it depends on your goal. Then binary step function, 0 or 1. Then bipolar step function. Then sigmoidal functions for continuous system, ramp functions. So these are some ways to represent the activation function. In activation function, then it comes for threshold. Threshold can be decided by yourself. So these some learning algorithms which you need to learn is supervised and unsupervised. You need to learn from some of the examples like perceptrons, backpropagation, multi-layer perceptrons, radial basis function networks. Then in unsupervised, competitive learning, coherent self-organization map, learning vector quantization, then heavier learning. So these are some ways you can learn the supervised as well as unsupervised learning. Now, neural processing, recall. What is recall here? Processing phase for the neural network. And its objective is to retrieve the information, the process of computing the output for a given input. Basic forms of neural information processing are auto-association, heteroassociation, and classification. So neural processing association, set of patterns can be stored in the network. If a pattern similar to the member of the stored set is presented, an association with the input of closest stored pattern is met, and that is called decision is made. Now, neural processing heteroassociation, associations between the pairs of patterns are stored. Distorted input patterns may cause correct heteroassociation at the output. Then it comes neural processing classification. Set of input patterns is divided into a number of classes or categories. In response to an input pattern from the set, the classifier is supposed to recall the information regarding class membership of the input patterns. Now, the important terminologies which you need to know in ANNs are weights, bias, threshold, learning rate, momentum factor, vigilance parameter, notations used in ANN. Weights, that is, each neuron is connected to every other neuron by means of directed links. Links are associated with weights. So weights contain information about the input signal and is represented as a matrix. Weight matrix is called connection matrix, and this can be seen here. So this is the weight matrix, and this Wij is the weight matrix from processing elements I. And then the mathematical equations could be written for here. Then activation functions used to calculate the output response of a neuron. Some of the weighted input signal is applied with the N activation to obtain the response. Activation functions can be linear or non-linear. So what you can understand here, identity function, single binary step function, discrete, these things we have discussed. Now, what is bias? Bias is like another weight. It's included by adding a component, something, to the input vector. Bias is of two types, positive and negative bias. Positive bias increases the net input. Negative bias decreases the net input. Now, why bias is required? The relationship between input and output given by the equation of a straight line. That is, for example, y equals mx plus c. So here, set of values based upon which the final output of the network may be calculated. It is used in activation function. The activation function using threshold can be defined in simpler way. Then this is the learning rate. Here you can see is denoted by alpha. It is used to control the amount of weight adjustment at each step of training. Learning rate ranging from 0 to 1 determines the rate of learning in each time step. Other terminologies are momentum factors, vigilance parameters, and these things are quite simple to understand. Now, neural network learning rules you have also learned well. Then it comes Hebbian learning rules, the different types of learning rules. Then features of Hebbian learning rule. The learning rule, the learning signal is equal to the neuron's output. This is Hebbian rule. Then what are the features? Feed forward unsupervised learning. When an axon of a cell A is near enough to excite a cell B, and repeatedly and persistently takes place in the firing it. Some growth process or change takes place in one or both the cells, increasing the efficiency. If this OIXJ is positive, the result is increase in weight, else vice versa. So this is how you can understand this Hebbian learning rule for the same inputs for bipolar continuous activation function. The final updated weight is given somehow here. You can understand. Then perceptron learning rules. Learning signal is the difference between the desired and actual neurons response. Learning is supervised here. Now, these are the some of the example. Then next is delta learning rule, only valid for continuous activation function, used in supervised training mode. Learning signal for this rule is called delta. The aim of the delta rule is to minimize the error over all training patterns. Now, then it comes withdraw of learning rule, which is also called at least mean square learning rule. Then it is independent of activation function and it is supervised learning. A special case of delta learning rule where activate. So this is basically a special case of delta learning. It minimizes the squared error between the desired output value and the net. So then you can go for winner take all the rule. So where it can be explained for a layer of neurons, example of competitive learning and used for unsupervised network training. Learning is based on the premise that one of the neurons in the layer has a maximum response due to the input X. This neuron is declared the winner with a weight. So then summary of learning rules. So you have learned Hebbian, Hebbian, perceptron, delta, withdraw off, winner trick all, and then you can go for linear separability. Separation of the input space into regions is based on whether the network response is positive or negative. Line of separation is called linear separation line. Then there are some examples and function or function, XOR function, linearly, which is like quite simple to understand if you are aware of basics of modern physics. Then have network and flow chart of have network training algorithm. So have learning rule is the simplest one. The learning in the brain is performed by the change in the synaptic gap, and the have rule can be used for the pattern association, pattern categorization, pattern classification, and problem can be solved by using the